Welcome back to another edition of Zero Block 30. Today, after much ado, we've been talking about it for probably 2 months, and we said they were going to do it in a month, but we waited 2 months to give you plenty of time. Absolutely no excuses. Today, we're going to be talking about the book, A River of Doubt. Connor's not here, which marks, I think, 5 out of the last 10 episodes that Connor hasn't been here. I personally am thrilled that he's getting a paycheck still, even though he's not part of the show whatsoever for half the time.
Oh, do we have the power to get him fired?
I'm going to. I think
I would love that.
Yeah. Like, oh, look, I have stuff to do with my full-time job. I'm going to Ireland. I don't want to read a book.
Oh, yeah,
do your fucking job, Connor.
That's right. He was in Ireland.
Yeah, he was in Ireland.
He had a long ass flight and could have knocked it out right there.
You've been on 2 less shows in the last 2 months than Connor.
Inexcusable.
And you're not even a military guy.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, but you did more in the World War II areas than
he is. He's absent right now.
Yeah, he's
cool.
Yeah.
I'll be
disgusting.
damned. I'll be damned.
Disgusting. Look at classic officer gallivanting around, doing all kinds of things, leaving the enlisted folk to do all the work, but still want your name on the masthead, Cons.
I get it.
That being said, let's talk. You want to talk about Army football for a second?
They're doing well.
They are doing well.
Are they doing well?
People are saying playoffs.
They are, but people are also saying the Navy is much, much better than they are. That there is the quarterback for Navy. The last time somebody, I think he had 7 passing touchdowns, 7 rushing touchdowns. And the last time somebody did that was Lamar Jackson in his Heisman Trophy campaign. So people are really going nuts about Navy football, which is really overshadowing Army football.
Can I make an admission?
Yeah.
I actively root against Army football because of Cons.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. So that's okay.
Welcome to the club.
Absolutely.
Oh, I forgot you're a classic Cons hater.
Oh,
yeah. About this.
Yeah.
How could I have?
Yeah.
Oh,
the
my
biggest.
Goodness. Whoa.
I love it.
Start calling you Captain Dave.
Yeah.
Captain Dave is here.
Yep. So we have all right, that's enough Cons bashing, I guess. Anyway, fuck Cons. But we have today we're going to be talking about The River of Doubt and Teddy Roosevelt. Kate, this was your book recommendation.
Yes, I don't read much anymore because having 2 kids smoothed my brain into like a pearl, basically. There's nothing, no crevices, nothing. I got nothing. I try and read, I get 2 sentences deep, done so. But many years ago, I read that book and I loved it so much. I read it like 3 times, but it's about Teddy Roosevelt. He runs for a 3rd term of all. He gets done his 2nd term and he's just like, fuck it. I'm going to go for a 3rd. I know it's not legal, but I'm doing it. And still he sold out like Madison Square Garden. People were like, yeah, man, fuck it. Go for it.
It was legal at the time.
Oh,
yeah.
It was just like kind of an unspoken rule that you weren't supposed to do it. But then it actually became an amendment to the Constitution after FDR was in his 4th term.
Oh,
right.
Shit.
Yeah.
Oh,
during wartime. So George Washington originally said that. He's like 2 terms max. That'll be it.
Also, George Washington, fun fact about him that I was reading about that I forgot, makes me laugh. No one ever wanted to be president less than George Washington.
Yeah, wasn't he getting his house renovated like down south? And all he wanted to do was like go hang out and watch his house get renovated.
Yeah, he wanted to do that. And his inauguration, guess how long it was?
Like 15 minutes.
Then
4 minutes.
135 words.
Beautiful.
Dude, I feel the same way.
Bring them back.
Weddings, retirement ceremonies, like inaugurations.
Yeah.
Keep it quick and get me to the bar.
Yep.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
That's why people liked him. They're like, oh, we're doing State of the Union, 15 minutes and we're out of here.
Bingo bango.
Next thing you know, you got Joe Biden getting 18 vitamin B shots up his dick hole so he can talk for 25 minutes.
Anyways, I learned a lot. I think one of the interesting things about the book, even though I just fucked up the president part, the running for the 3rd time illegal, I felt like I learned a lot about history that I didn't realize during that era in time. And also, I guess just living in this era where we have the internet and our computers and our phones and blah, 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 and I can't imagine life without it. The thought of going deep into the nothingness of South America and just like winging it with no contact to the outside world back when a trip took like a year, like, that's just crazy to me, let alone doing it as a former president of the United States.
Yeah. So let's talk about how it's set up, because I was fascinated. Like, even though it seems like Teddy Roosevelt was president so long ago to
what
us,
was the years?
You know, it was
1901 to 1905 and the term before that, I believe, right?
Yeah. So late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's only 130 years, 125 years ago.
Yeah.
And when you think about that on the grand scale of humanity, that's nothing. But to the American mind, because our history is so short, it seems ancient. And imagining now, 20 presidents later, somebody like, let's say Barack Obama or a Bill Clinton goes and they're like, you know what? I want to run for a third term after my second. They don't get it. And then they completely go off the grid for 8 months.
Yeah.
Like that. They're just like, I'm going to leave my wife and kids. I'm going to bring one of my kids and we're going to go chart something.
Yeah.
Like it would be the story. Like people would be like, no way, dude. No way you're going to do that. No Secret Service went with him anywhere. He didn't have any of that type of protection that was going on down the river with him.
If Trump was like, I'm going to get in that submarine and go down to the Titanic, we'd be like, no, you cannot.
Yeah.
Like, you're not allowed to do that.
And I'm going to stay there for 7 months.
Yeah.
Like, think about how you'd be worried about somebody getting captured now. Like, if Clinton or Obama was on one of those trails and somebody comes out, that would be the concern of America. I don't even know if they would allow a former president to do that.
No way they would, right?
Because they can fight some things. Like, I know Barack has been driving recently.
I've heard that.
And
yeah,
they're not supposed to be driving, but he has like a car in front of him behind, and he had like there's all kinds of rules, but he wanted to drive type of situation. But I don't think they let you go to the Amazon.
No way.
I don't even know if they want you to go on Amazon for a month now that it's like plotted.
True. Yeah, no, I don't think so. It's crazy too. Like, one other thing before we even get to that part, he was a kid. He had asthma so bad. He was like on his deathbed 24/7.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yes.
And he basically was like, I'm tired of having asthma and feeling like I'm going to die all the time. Like, dude could not breathe. Like, it was so severe that they didn't even think he was going to make it to adulthood. And he was like, I think I'm just going to beat asthma now.
It was one of those
just
times
not
where
have
having,
it. Yeah.
Like having a tough nosed dad really pays off.
Yeah.
You know, like I think now, like, let's say my kid's 12 years old. If Cardi somehow got really bad asthma and couldn't do it, and I'm having this same exact talk with McCartney that Teddy's dad had with him, and I'm like, look, you got to get it together. No medicine is going to help you. You just got to basically stop being a pussy and go out there and beat asthma by lifting logs and carrying shovels full of sand.
Yeah.
I love it. In a way, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically worked the asthma out of him.
He just is like, that's like the genesis of a lot of the story too. Is just like, I got to stop being a pussy. I got to stop being a bitch. I'm going to do something that shouldn't be done or hasn't been done or can't be done. Maybe that's my favorite part about it. Like, I know he's had his warts as a human, a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say look up to, like, I gravitate towards those kind of people. Like, I heard, for instance, Tiger Woods woke up one day and he's like, I want to drive the ball 30 farther yards. And it was like a mental thing where he's just like, I'm driving the ball 30 yards farther every time I swing.
People
like, I like those kind of people.
And are like, I'm actually going to fucking do it.
I'm going to fucking do it.
Like, but I bet it's sick.
I bet it's awesome, right?
Yeah. I mean, all the different things. Cause we look at, like, there's this story, River of Doubt, where if you just had that one story about your bravery, your sense of courage for your whole life, that's enough. Yeah. I feel like that's enough type of courage and bravery to show that that's the type of person you are. He has several of these types of stories, like going around with John Muir and tracking the Grand Canyon, going Lewis and Clark's trail, like so many things that he did throughout the history of his life. And they all culminated in this experience. It would be, it's truly remarkable, like what he did. But let's go through some of the actual specifics of it, because I do think that it's one of the crazier stories that I've ever read.
Yeah, no, it's bananas. It's pretty crazy.
All right,
it's a good adventure.
So before he goes on this trip, like Kate said, he was going for his third term, and he was going up against, was it Grover Cleveland? No, Taft, right?
Taft, I believe.
Taft. Yeah. So he was going up against Taft and one other dude, and he was basically the third party candidate. Like the Bull Moose Party became the third party candidate. And in this, there's some badass stories too, like where he gets shot in the chest when he's giving this address. He's giving like a campaign speech, and he gets shot in the chest and continues to give the whole speech. Now, I know recent history with President Trump catching the round to the ear Like everybody was like, he put his hand up and said fight and then got carried off stage. That's the most badass shit. Imagine if Trump in that rally took one to like the shoulder or the chest,
shattering
somehow.
his collarbone.
Like
yeah,
it hit like a piece of paper or book that was in his pocket. I think it was actually a pocket constitution. I might have made that up in my brain, but I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
I think it was a pocket constitution where it gets hit and then he just stands up and instead of fighting, he just goes on and gives his crazy speech about sharks and Hannibal Lecter.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It would be incredible.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the kind of brain he had.
Yeah.
Like I said, I gravitate towards those type of people, but also on the contrast, I'm like, I'm such a fucking loser. I like everything the internet says about me. I get it now. I am. You're right. Like,
but there is something. I think that if you were around people like Teddy, you would do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like, and I
bully
think
you.
right, like the rest of the Rough Riders. I think that's kind of what everybody has those breaking points where you're like, this is just, I want to fucking quit.
Yeah.
Like I want to quit. And even Teddy seemed like he had some of those spots on the River of Doubt, but wouldn't do it because of his son. Really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he got shot and he did this speech. He goes and gives this big speech at Madison Square Garden that's completely packed out where he thinks
people were like climbing the walls to get in. Like
absolute scenes. And he thinks that he's going to win, but he doesn't. And for somebody like Teddy Roosevelt that has overcome all those obstacles in his life, like asthma and having to work through it and going all over the place, being president of the United States twice, being resoundingly popular when he was president too, like won in huge numbers his second term. And so then he loses. The psychology and how that affects your brain has to be devastating.
Yeah, apparently he was devastated, and a ton of people were pissed at him too because they were like, "Hey, dickhead, you split the vote. Like you used to be on our side, and then you split the vote."
And he knew it.
So he like alienated a huge sector that used to love him. So not only did he lose, he had a huge new group that hated him.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah. He did that.
So he gets down. Let's go through like what actually did. Do you remember, Kate? So not round one, but when he first gets to the Amazon.
Well, then also his wife and
his wife and daughter. That's what spurred it, right?
And so he loses the election. His wife and daughter die, and he just spirals. And he had known a guy, this great explorer, and he was like, "Come on, let's go do this adventure." He kept bugging the explorer, right? You guys read it more recently than me.
Yeah. So he there's this explorer that works at like a university.
George Sherry.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. And so he works at a university and he's trying to get him to do all this stuff with him and like get him to kind of take care of be like the company gunny, do like the beans, bullets, and bad guys. Like,
and Sherry had gone to the South America, to the Amazon a bunch, and now he was kind of ready to settle in back home again. He was kind of over all the trips down there. And Roosevelt was like, come on.
And I imagine that's like one of your old military buddies being like, Kate, you've wanted to do it before. Let's go.
Come on, let's go.
Go with me. A little peer pressure.
So they decide to do it. The expedition was poorly equipped for the Amazon's realities, carrying overly heavy gear and unsuitable supplies. They departed with enthusiasm, but underestimated the difficulties ahead. And that's right. Like, you don't know what you don't know. It was so uncharted that. And like, it's the same with like when you go hiking the Appalachian Trail, like one of the biggest things is to get your pack so streamlined that it is as light as humanly possible. The more bulk and the more shit you have, the slower you're going to go. And the slower you go, the higher the chances you die are.
Yeah.
Just like in any kind of exploring, that's just the way it goes.
And it's funny that same thing exists now, like with Appalachian Trail. Like I read the book called The Walk in the Woods. I think you read that one too. Yeah. And where everything should be as light as possible. And then in the book, they outline like what he's trying to bring. And it's like some steel bottom bows.
Right.
Yeah.
That they're going to have to go through the jungle. And at that time, I don't know if Teddy how many pictures can you really have seen in the late 1800s of what's going on there? Like you can't see the thickness of that jungle and know like the trails that you're going to have to cut. And carrying all that stuff, you're like, oh yeah, this will make it easy, man. Like we'll just bring these fucking big ass boats and carry them.
Yeah.
Easy.
Not so much. They brought pretty much a lot of the wrong shit. And he's bringing his son too, by the way, his son Kermit along for the ride, and a whole big group. they get there and right away they're like, oh shit. Like once they get into the Amazon, the vegetation's overwhelming. As we know, a lot of venomous creatures and the heat. It's not, if you've ever been in like a dry heat, even like in Iraq and Afghanistan, like it's 120, but it's hot, but you're okay unless you're trying to jerk off in a porta shitter. It's a different vibe.
Yeah.
But the humidity will take you out at like 80 degrees on a super humid
Oh,
day.
yeah.
You're like, fuck me. They were not prepared for the humidity and the heat and all that stuff. Also, the River of Doubt, this like tributary to the Amazon that they were going up, like it was uncharted. So they didn't know if they were coming up on a waterfall, on a this or that. And with their heavy ass boats, it's not like you can just hop out and drag everything around and whatever with the vegetation.
And we got to think of this trip and how long they think it's going to take. They think it's going to be like a 8 to 10 week trip.
Yeah.
Originally is what they think. So they can't rely on getting any type of food from the jungle. They thought that they were going to get a whole bunch of fish, that they were going to be able to catch fish all the time, which is what my natural thought would be too.
Mm-hmm.
Like what kind of fish I can get. But they were carrying through these jungles they didn't have like Merrill boots on. They didn't have our friends at Rocky boots on their feet.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like these dudes are basically wearing Payless shoe boxes on their feet for 15 hours a day hiking for weeks at a time.
Yeah.
When he's in his late 50s, like his early 50s.
I try and picture my dad even going for a speed walk, and it's tough to picture, let alone. But anyway, so it's too late now. They're on their way, and it's becoming immediately apparent they have too much shit. It's too heavy. Tropical diseases is something they didn't account for. Like when back then, you go to a new continent, you're going to be exposed to diseases that you've never been exposed to. Typhoid, all this other stuff, like
cholera was a
big one.
Was a real malaria. I think Teddy caught malaria twice.
They all did. Yeah. They all had malaria
like the whole time.
Uh-huh. And that makes your head fuzzy and everything. They're exhausted, like trying to sleep when you're wet and humid and like,
it's impossible.
Covered in bugs.
The fucking worst. And hostile environment. There was tribes and everything along the river that were like, who the fuck are you?
They killed the fucking dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
They killed their dog. They brought dogs along.
Uh-huh.
This tribe killed the dog.
Yeah.
That was like the part of the book I hated the most.
You son of a bitch.
They walked up to it and there was just arrows all over the dog and going through the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And then morale, you have this whole group that you're paying, but not that crazy. Like nobody was getting paid enough for what was happening there.
No, because they still had like worker bees. Like, I mean, Teddy was the former president, and I assume that he worked really hard too. But the book made it clear that he's not the one that's digging like trenches and shit. Like it's the worker.
There was like 80
people,
right?
Yeah.
Is that what I recall?
Yeah. At the beginning.
And at the beginning, and it ended with like 50. I want to say
less.
I
think it was 15 at the.
Oh shit!
It was very, very small group at the.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So then they start hitting sections with rapids, and again, chopping through the jungle, pulling the boats out. Their progress gets slow, and that means too, like unexpected delays means you're eating through. That's a lot of people eating through the supplies, like whatever.
And these rapids were like class 4, class 5 rapids that you would see now. Like going down the Amazon that's not like rookie whitewater shit. So they had all of this food, their rations that were in there. And there are several times that these big boats, or even when they switched to the hollowed out boats, that the boats flipped in the waterfalls, or they flipped going down the rapids, and then they would see their rations floating down too, and they would have to try to go get it. Can you imagine how broke off you would be if you lost your ship because it went, or you lost your boat because it went down a waterfall, cracked in half, and was completely broken, and then you were like, all right, so what we're gonna have to do is cut down this fat ass tree, and then we're gonna hollow it out with hand tools in a couple days time so that we can get going again.
Yeah.
How difficult that task of no power tools, just hand chopping wood to get the center out of it.
I went canoeing down the Brandywine River with my Life Teen group.
Oh shit.
Back in the day when I was in probably 9th or 10th grade.
South Carolina Squeezer?
No, this was Pennsylvania. A couple of the canoes slipped. You know, the real drama girls back then who were like acting, they were in stage crew, and we had a couple of those on the school. This was a 2-hour canoe trip, and like it was just a fucking disaster, and it was just a couple sandwiches that fell out of the boat. So I'm just saying, I understand what they went through.
The whole time I was reading this, thinking about how old Teddy and like his like companions were, some of the other companions, I was like remember around Father's Day when I did that 100-mile bike ride?
Yeah.
How happy and proud of myself I was that I rode on sidewalks and perfectly manicured trails that were brought to you by our friends at the Indiana State Park.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I fucking did it. And this dude, 2-term president, is down there with his son going through the jungles getting fingers chomped on by piranhas.
Yeah. Not great.
Not great at all.
No. So then you're not going to believe this. The dangers get even worse. People are starting to starve. Food's dwindling. Moods are bad.
Oh, bad.
Indigenous tribes are rumored to be nearby. And so now and they have arrows, like you said, like the dog got taken out by arrows and shit. It was kind of like, not to bring it back to Iraq and Afghanistan, but like when there was word that there was a sniper nearby and you're out on patrol and you're like, wow, any second now my head could just get blown off and I won't even know it. Like that, like going down the river and being like, wow, we're sitting ducks, and like any second now that could just be like the psychological effect that has on you after a while. Not great. And Roosevelt's health began to decline due to a leg injury that later became infected. And infection too, like you're just so fucked on the, like, I have a friend who went tubing in Thailand and got a cut in her leg and she almost died from an infection. Like, anyway, she was hammered.
By the way, recently one of our friends from back home, they were on a jet ski ride and they fell off the back of their jet ski and they're trying to get back up. And you know, whenever you have sometimes you're trying to get in a jet ski that has like the bar on the back of it where you can grab and put your fingers like on there and then pull yourself from the back. Well, somebody else gunned the jet ski and the jet of water straight up their butthole and ruined, like prolapsed their entire asshole.
There's no way.
Swear to God.
There's no
Look it up. It happens all the time. It happens more than those fucking hammock deaths.
That's a thing that happens.
I'm horrified now.
I refuse to believe.
Look it up.
Of going on a jet ski ever again.
Yeah, jet ski blowing out your pussy or your butthole. Happens.
I'll be goddamn.
Yeah, you got to be careful. That's why there's a sticker. Don't come on from this way. You got to come on from the side. Because if you do it and somebody, like, even if you get on there and you're blow it out.
I'll be damned.
That never happened to Teddy. Imagine that happens to you on the Amazon. He just had his little foot hurt.
Do you think he would have even accepted a jet ski to get down that river?
Maybe
like if
when he was like shaking about to die.
I don't know that he would have. He would have been like, nope, I got to finish this by foot like I set out to do.
Yeah,
this was also my favorite, like the start of my favorite chunk of the book, I should say. Millard, the author. So I was listening to this when we were at Camp Barstool.
Yeah.
And obviously I was I was intoxicated in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just sitting there like all bundled up in the imagery of being in this forest and how she described it and through words. And obviously I'm listening at this point. So sound.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It's like, this is the same planet we live on. And like, I don't know, the monkeys they found, the trees, the canopy, like
that they hunted a fucking jaguar. Like that Kermit went out to try to get food and like went off the trail searching for a jaguar while this dude had malaria and had like 104 temperature.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. I think too, like that's one of the things that keeps people going. And I'm this way. Like I used to love hiking and all that stuff. Have I mentioned my back yet before my back got fucked up?
I haven't heard that, no.
But like the sense of wonder I would get from seeing a bird I've never seen before, like my heart, like I'm such a dork, but like just seeing new things and seeing cool shit is like could propel me another 1,000 miles forward. Like I can go dummy far if I put my mind to it. Like I also get it. So like, even though when things suck, when you're seeing new shit every few steps, like that's enough. Like, so I get how shit was terrible, but that they kept going forward. But then there was a murder in the jungle.
Yeah.
Yes.
And while they're doing this, they also have no option.
Right.
Like you're in the middle. You either die or you keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you're past the point of no return.
It's not like there's another exit ramp where you can go off and have somebody pick you up from the love truck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, like that's not happening.
So
a lot lizard.
And this,
do you think they had any down
lizards.
there?
Love them.
Do you think they had any down there?
Lot lizards?
Yeah.
I bet there was like port lizards.
Yeah, port lizards.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Like when you get off the port, like when you get off the Rio Grande, I bet post River of Doubt puss is the best.
Oh, I'm sure.
Or dick.
Thank you. I'm sure there was a lady in. No.
Were there women? I don't think there were.
No, there wasn't.
No, they weren't allowed.
It's the love of Kermit's life on the boat who was waiting for. Anyway, meanwhile, that's right. His son Kermit had found the love of his life, and she was waiting for him to get back from this trip. Anyways, this is another part of the group dynamic too. You had the Brazilian members and the people from America and blah, blah, blah. And like different cultures too, trying to get through a difficult time. Like everybody reacts differently and has different ways of handling things. And you put in a language barrier too, and that makes it even more difficult sometimes. So Julio murders another member of the team, Paulo, in a moment of madness. Julio flees into the jungle and the group decides, like, let's just fucking let him go.
So Julio was kind of, so we could set the scene on.
Yeah.
Oh, Julio was kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like Julio was the kind of guy, we all have him in our unit from time to time, where everybody else is doing exactly what you're supposed to do. Julio is the guy that is rat fucking all the MREs. He's the one that's opening up the beef MREs so he can take out like the Skittles and get all the goodies like the power bars and shit like that, stealing rations. And they found him once. And I'm a firm believer in this situation. Granted, it's very different back then. For me, and Kate, you're going to hate this.
Uh-oh.
I find somebody's stealing and I'm the leader. We're beating the shit out of you. Like you are getting your ass fucking beat.
Well, out there, it's like their own law system too.
Yeah, like
so.
you have to do. You can't be like, oh, don't do that. You're in timeout. Like what other real recourse do you have except for
you got to beat their ass?
Yeah.
Pain compliance is important in a situation like
absolutely. Whoop their ass.
But too, so this guy murders another member of the team and he just runs off into the jungle and they're like, okay, bye. Like, hopefully we never see that guy again. And that's just it. Like, but it highlights how the stress and the extreme conditions were fucking up the group mentality. And this, I keep
they're going crazy.
They're going crazy. I keep bringing it back to Iraq and Afghanistan. In the AO just south of us, a Marine murdered another Marine because he kept sleeping over on night watch. Like it was like a night watch thing. They were all exhausted and he was tired of being woken up and blah, 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 blah. And like, there was like people lose their fucking minds under extreme stress when the conditions are crazy, whatever. Anyways.
And this one was like Teddy had that mindset where he wanted the dude to just be left out in the jungle.
Yeah.
Like the guy that was in charge of the Brazilians that spoke the language and can communicate. And he was like their commanding officer before, he had established rapport. He wanted to go and get the guy, take him into captivity and have him be like a prisoner. So whenever he went back, they could do like proper Brazilian charges.
Yeah.
He wanted to give him like his habeas corpus rights, essentially. And Teddy was like, nah, fuck that, dude. Like, we're just going to leave his ass here. He wants to steal and kill. He could steal and kill out here in the jungle by himself.
That's the luck.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
So then they're doing that. And they decide that like the Brazilian leader, the Brazilian commander kind of relents. And he says, all right, we'll go. Well, 2 days or 3 days later, they're going down the river. And who do they see on the banks? Old fucking Julio standing there waving, looking like a sad sack Sally. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. You know what they did? The same fucking thing I would do. Kept paddling, baby.
Yeah.
See ya.
Kept paddling.
Later.
And then can you imagine how viral that story would be?
Oh,
yeah.
Like President Obama goes on 6-month tour down the River of Doubt. One of his companions kills another guy. President Obama sees him, videotapes him while he's going by and just says, bye
later.
See you later. But then also too, though, I'd be worried that he was following us, that he was going to get like psychologically that fucked me up too.
Yep.
Now back to Kermit, his son Kermit. I got the vibe that Kermit was trying his whole life to impress the fuck out of his dad.
So
desperate.
have you guys watched Monsters yet?
No.
Brand new on Netflix about the Menendez brothers.
Okay.
No, different one.
I just finished it literally this morning and I couldn't put it down. It was that good and it was outstanding. But do you guys remember that story?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I vaguely remember that story. I was like 6 when it was happening, but I remember the OJ, all that. Long story short, they were desperate for father approval, even though he was a rapist and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I got from here. Depressed. Obviously, later in life, he committed suicide in Alaska when he was in the military.
Yeah.
World War II, but like insanely. But you see this guy physically, and if he was in the same room as you, you think that is like he commands a presence. I'm sure, like insanely confident, well spoken, like good looking,
super smart,
smart,
also
and
a huge adventure. It was always like
the daredevil.
Got to go to Africa with his dad on safari.
On safaris for his 18th, right?
jumping
And
off a
it's
waterfall
that
for funsies when he has malaria.
Yeah.
juxtaposition of his mental like battle within his head. I love that too.
Yeah.
Yep. That was a great story.
He was my favorite character, probably. Just like
Kermit,
Kermit
as-
probably, like the rest of our listeners, are using our friends at BetterHelp because Zero Blog 30 is
He-
sponsored by
he needed
BetterHelp.
him. Yep.
It's Halloween season, so let's have some fun with what scares us. But what about those that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding a way to overcome them, because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. I think that's true. Like me and I was talking to Donnie, the one-ton Don, the other day, and we were talking about how one of our biggest mental hurdles is
biggest mental
our biggest mental hurdles is hyperfixation on things. Where you see, especially
you're a huge hyperfixation guy. Pangea phase you went through last year.
But
you
even
get all your tools. You get like, I got
do.
7 barbecue grills the other weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, like if I like something, I
Bikes is
really
your
fucking
new
like
one.
it.
That's
Bikes and grills. I got a new grill
I know
recently
you
too,
did.
a
I
little
know.
griddle. But you have like hyperfixation on different ideas. And I think like working in a place like Barstool, you see people who are really successful, like Dave and Dan and PFT, and how good they are at their job. And then you look at yourself, and by every other measure on like podcasting world, like what we do for a living, ours is successful. But you look at somebody else and let comparison be the thief of your joy, and you don't learn to like appreciate where you're at unless you're doing things like therapy. It helps you not compare yourself and just be focusing on what you can do in your own moment. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, or switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/0 today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/0. So old Kermie is doing everything that he can for his dad. And I think what you said is right, Kate. And like, to go back military style, granted, Kermit is his son, is Teddy's son, but there's those leaders that you respect so much that you are willing to do anything, like that you don't want to disappoint them in any way. There's still guys, Lugo. I talk about him. I don't talk about him nearly as much, but when we first started doing this show and I shared a lot of personal stories, it was about him. If he called me today and was like, I need you to be on a plane to help me, I need you to be here by tonight, I would be on my way to O'Hare without asking like what it's about, anything like that. I would be there. Kermit was that kind of ride or die dude for his dad. And I think a lot of it comes from when you have a dad like that, it's got to be very difficult.
Yeah.
Like Michael Jordan's sons, like people that are very, very successful. That's a tough road to hoe, because you want to match your parents' accomplishments. And realistically, the moment that Kermit was born, he was never going to do that.
No.
Right. No.
Impossibility.
Yep.
So even though he had malaria and he had cholera at one point as well, he still was trying to help his dad, carrying some of his dad's weight, doing everything, going out, volunteering to be like the point man, the scout on the missions, to go out ahead, to put some trails out. Kermit was a badass motherfucker.
He almost drowned a few times.
Yeah.
I remember by the way they were describing it, it sounded like they were trying to ford a rapid, like in the Oregon Trail or something. And Teddy was like, no, don't fucking do that. And Kermit's like, no, I got this. Did it. Lost everything. And Kermit was like barely keeping his nose above water, hanging onto a branch when they found him and everything.
And you know, like in that moment, I imagine Kermit like hanging on, being like, Dad's gonna be so proud of me.
Yeah.
Look at what I'm doing.
I'm fucking dodging death right now.
I don't have
exactly
asthma.
what.
I don't have asthma at all.
Yeah. And then leadership, obviously, as morale's falling apart, as people are dropping out of the trip, and there had to be a pressure too from both Roosevelts. Like, we're the fucking Roosevelts. Everyone's expecting us to crush this, and things are falling apart. Like, leadership started falling apart a little bit, and it wasn't like they ever caught a break, because the nature continued to overwhelm the team. Every turn of the river, there was a new disease, starvation, other tribes that wanted them dead. The Amazon jungle, the heat, the thick brush, like wildlife, like they just could not catch a break no matter what they did. And
what I thought was really cool about this part too is when they were going through and they were trying to fish, they were trying to find any type of food. Because imagine how many, like the caloric deficit that you would be in daily.
Sweating like
Oh
this.
yeah,
Sweating like this.
He
moving
went
up
from
and down
220 to
hills.
150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah,
They said
he lost a shit ton of weight on this expedition. And then whenever they're doing that, they have to be super careful because there's things that nobody had even heard about. Like nobody in America knew what piranhas were. Like they writing letters back and describing what piranhas were, where one dude nicked his finger and fell asleep and his hand fell out of the raft and into the water and was dragging along the water. And when he pulled it up, he could see
Just
bones
bone.
in like 3 of his fingers. And you're not going to the doctor.
Nope.
You're going to be in a jungle environment, which I'm pretty sure, I'm not a scientist, but that's where bacteria grows really well.
Pretty well.
In a wet, humid, hot environment.
Sounds tailor-made for some disease.
Right.
Yeah, they get to the final leg, which how did they even know they were at the final? Like, that's the other thing. Like, you just never know how close you are to the finish line because you're the first ones doing it. Sheer willpower. Basically, it was like, we have to keep going or we're going to die. They managed to survive barely with they had like literally no food left when they finally got to the end.
And not just that, but Roosevelt himself was on the verge of suicide.
Yeah.
Like he had gotten so bad. His infection had gotten so bad from when I think a splintered piece of wood went into his leg that had already been messed up and it festered and got really infected. And they were having to move really slow at like a quarter of the pace that they would for everybody else. And Roosevelt knew that the only reason why they basically didn't take him out of his misery is because he was the president, the former president. And they didn't want to come out and be like, we lost the former president. So they went really, really slow. They even had to stop for a couple days when they had no rations. You have all these other people. These Brazilians probably didn't give a fuck that it was an American president.
Yeah.
Like if we went out as a group, like a group of Barstool folks, and they happened to throw in like the president of fucking Brazil, I wouldn't give a shit about the president of Brazil, about what he's doing. Be like, well, we'll just leave him here and we got to go. Otherwise, everybody else dies. Like that would be my mindset as a leader. You either say one person stays and that person dies, or we're all going to die out here. But they didn't do that. Roosevelt had cyanide, like legit cyanide, in his pocket that he would carry with him. And he was so close to putting it into his mouth. And it wasn't until Kermit talked him out of it and was like, I'm going to do everything for you. You're not going to do this.
Yeah. And by the time they finally got back to civilization, it had been months on the Amazon and Roosevelt was like on the brink of death. The physical shit he went through, he never recovered from. Like the rest of his life, he suffered from the shit he went through. And for Kermit, the rest of the survivors, they basically all came out with PTSD. Like they all came out from that trip, like completely fucked up, and none of them were ever the same afterwards.
But how could you be?
Right. Yeah.
I want to talk about that part real quick. When they're coming down the river and they describe seeing that actual man-made built house on the river, and they saw like smoke from a campfire, how good of a feeling do you I mean, probably a little bit of fear too, like are they gonna kill us? But like just to see anybody like that's not hunting you or doesn't seem like they're hunting you, I'd be like, weight off my shoulder, like we almost are there.
Right.
And
they invited him in and like had dinner at that point.
Like I was thinking about the self-control too, where when they do get to that village
and
they have plenty of food and they're like, whatever you guys want. And they eat, one of them ate like 4 or 5 cups of rice and they started to vomit because they hadn't had that much food.
Yeah. Their stomach's going to handle it.
So long. And then to get out of there, I think the last thing I would ever want to do if I did this trip was to get back on a boat.
Oh, fuck that. Yeah, no, absolutely.
You gotta go all the way.
It's like in Castaway when he has the like party at the end and he looks at the big, giant, beautiful looking king crab leg. He's just like, he just chucks it. Like, no, thank you.
Right.
You guys just had all this shit the whole time. Like, oh my God. After the expedition, the River of Doubt was renamed Rio Roosevelt in honor of Theodore Roosevelt. And the journey became a defining chapter in Roosevelt's legacy, showcasing his relentless spirit and leadership. But it also marked the beginning of his physical decline. Like, again, him and nobody else was the same after that. And this was the beginning of the end for him. At the same time, because we were talking about like how badass it is that he kept overcoming these things, but we're also ignoring the part that like he destroyed a lot of lives in his wake, and like,
oh yeah,
he fucked a lot of people up.
People suffered
along the
because of
way,
him.
a lot of suffering, a lot of like for him, for his own legacy. Like he's the one who ended up with the great legacy from it. But
do you think it was a legacy thing that he wanted, or do you think it was like an incurable kind of desire to be his very best that he possibly could be? Like, I think that maybe that wasn't worded well, but
I think
I probably a combo, but I would tend to go to the latter. I mean, I think he was just insanely competitive with himself, and some people are just wired that way, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't be third.
Like the MJ's,
the Tiger for the third
yeah.
time, so I'm going to go out and do something that other people can't do or nobody has
He's
ever
just
done.
obsessed with being extraordinary.
Yeah, I find like it's a awesome story, and obviously, like for people that are listening now in a modern age, I actually was listening to How Things Happened. It was a podcast that from like 2008, and I was listening to it about Thomas Jefferson because I was going on a different show to talk about Thomas Jefferson. And the way that Thomas Jefferson was talked about in 2008 on a history podcast comparatively to how he's talked about now was so wildly different. And like this NPR podcast, and it was on NPR, they talk about how Jefferson at the time, whenever he was having all these kids, like he had a bunch of biracial kids because he was raping slaves.
Yeah.
They were like, he did so much for civil rights by having President blood in black people. And I was like, oh my God. Like, can you imagine?
Wait, who said that?
NPR. It's on like an
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, that's 2008, not 1908.
Yeah, it was. And they were also talking about how, what was it? Our TV's about to turn off, so it threw me. But they were talking about how contentious the debates were between President Obama and John McCain, and how they were like, this is the most contentious American election that we can imagine.
Just wait.
We can't imagine it being.
They walked up to each other and shook each other's hand and like dapped it up. I remember it.
I was backstage when they first met. Like I was standing by John McCain when Barack and John McCain were meeting originally, like before the debate in Long Island. And they were so nice to each other. They were joking around about like how big my dog was. Like President Obama was like, does that dog bite? I was like, if I tell him to. And he was like, can I pet him? I was like, sure. Yes, sir. And he pet him. And John McCain was like, can I tell him he's a good boy and give him a little ear? And I was like, yeah. And so he did it. And I was like, this is pretty fucking cool, man.
That is wild.
Yeah.
People that are working the dogs that are working those, they don't have those stories now.
No, nobody's, they're not all hanging out back.
Kamala and Trump aren't out there like scratching good boys and doing all that.
Yeah. They go, who's a good dog?
Now,
Oh, yeah.
Tim Walz, he's doing it.
Yeah, probably.
He's doing it.
Yeah, he is.
But back in the day, he had to have been seen. Like you come back from something like this. We don't have that anymore. Pretty much everywhere, except for the submarine, like except for under the ocean, pretty much everywhere has been explored now. To come back, like that was the age. I've just pulled up.
I got the map here.
Because we were talking about too, like it was still an age of exploration and the legacy, like the things people would do to be able to come back and be like, I did it. Like I'm the one who discovered that or whatever. Remember Ernest Shackleton and his squad and that terrible journey where pretty much everybody died on the ship. But this was the news.
Antarctica.
This was the newspaper ad. For men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. And like he got enough dudes to go on that journey. Like we're probably not coming back, but if we do,
we'll be badass.
We're gonna be the coolest people in the bar. I think come on, and that's all it takes, like to get some people being like, fuck, I can't say no to this. I gotta try. Like,
there are
people like that,
right? Like the kind of like the people that are trying to go to space for a little while, like not nearly the same thing, same investment, but risky.
And they said they scanned the brains of like, if you ever watched Free Solo with Alex Honnold, the climber and all that, they scanned a bunch of Free Solo. They're the people who climb mountain walls without any ropes or anything. Like they just one slip and there's no hope. They're dead. And they scan their brains are different. Like there's something different about their brains, that parts that light up that like the rest of us don't have. And I have to wonder if like all the great explorers of the time had that same.
I bet Donnie does has that.
He might.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
He might.
he
He
might.
probably does.
Just
Yeah.
that curiosity for the
Mhm.
unknown, I guess.
Yeah.
Unquenchable curiosity. Yeah.
But I get it. Like I totally get it.
Either
Just too
way,
much
it's
of a
a
pussy.
fantastic book, River of Doubt by Candace Millard.
Chaps reached out to her and she's like, I wrote that book like 20 years ago.
Yeah, she's
I'm
like, no thanks.
I have
But
other projects I'm working on. I get
go buy it if you haven't bought it, or rent it from your library, or download it on the Libby app, whatever you do. But it is a fantastic book. Even if you don't like nonfiction, it reads like a fiction.
It absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. It reads like nonfiction.
Yeah, like
And
if
there's
you
not
did-
like a ton of characters to learn. Just no
Yeah.
Teddy and Kermit.
Yeah,
and,
that's a good
yeah.
thing too. Like I think a lot of historical books are tough to read because
Right.
if you don't have a good historical grasp on the characters and the people that are around, it's hard to kind of glean who that is really quick.
Mhm.
Like, oh, you just throw in a King George III reference. Well, you know who King George III is, but if you don't, then there's some things that are in the story that don't make a whole lot of sense. This one doesn't have that. There's primarily like a 4 or 5 main characters that stay
Yeah,
with
and
you
that's
from
it.
the whole
Yeah.
journey, and that's it.
Oh, also Kermit. So the love of his life is on the boat with him, like to come down to drop him off for this journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it was on the boat because she's still down in South America too. Then that doesn't she get malaria or something like that? She gets some kind of disease that kills her, right?
I think on their journey home.
Was
Yeah.
that what it was?
Something
He
happens.
he probably gave it to her.
That something happens like as a result of that trip that kills the love of his life.
Remember
I'm
when
pretty sure.
you made out with Sam Darnold and got him sick?
I got a mono. You probably
Yeah,
remember
mono.
this. It was
I
a
do
big
remember
thing.
that,
I'm the
yeah.
one who gave Sam Darnold mono.
And they had that big
Yeah.
graphic, Sam Darnold mono.
Yep.
Mhm.
That was great.
But I'm the one who did that. But yeah, so that's crazy too. And then Kermit ends up taking his own life.
In
Later on when
44, I
he's-
believe. And
yeah.
then Kermit Jr., so Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, was the 3rd director of the CIA, I want to say.
Yeah, he's very
When
much
Alan Dulles and then Richard, and what was his last? Richard, why am I blanking on his last name?
I don't
And then
remember.
Kermit Roosevelt Jr. was the. So it all kind of ties together a little bit. Maybe if he would have died in the River of Doubt, we wouldn't be where we are today. Like
Yeah.
that kind of butterfly effect. There wouldn't,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there wouldn't be a CIA
True.
fucking
Or
everything
at the
up.
very least at Dulles Airport.
or that. Yeah,
True.
we
Yeah.
wouldn't have airports named after evil parts of our history.
Yeah,
That's right.
Crazy.
So the next, we'll do this again, another book review. I really like doing it. I think
This
it's fun.
was my favorite that I've read. One of my favorite books I've read ever.
It's such
Thank
a
you
good
for
book,
it's such a
yeah.
good
Yeah,
book.
great.
I got to
recommendation.
get back into reading. I really got to get
Yeah,
back.
I don't
Well-
want to brag, but I'm on book 65 this year.
Oh shit.
Mhm.
Listen to them.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah, that'd be
reading
great for
books
you
by
at night,
listening to
like
them.
just sitting there after while you're doing all your baby patting.
I know. Just read instead of scrolling TikToks and doom scrolling about bad things that can happen to. Watch out
What's
for
the-
hammocks. They kill more people here than you think.
All right, Kate.
button
Well,
batteries.
you can have some real danger in your life, like going down the Amazon, Uncharted, or just laying in a hammock. Either way, you're probably going to get hurt at some point in your life. So go live life like Teddy. We'll see. Oh,
What? Real quick. I have
okay.
one thing really quick. Obviously, we didn't talk about it today, but we'll definitely going to talk about it next week as we get more updates. But the flooding in Western North Carolina and like across Appalachias is insane. And we have right now on the Barstool store a Mountain Strong t-shirt that goes to Mana Food Bank in Western North Carolina. 100% of the proceeds will go to it. So they're going to help feed people and help people take care of what they need over the next however long they're going to need it, because it's like absolutely profound. Also, there's a diaper bank. Look up North Carolina Diaper Bank if you want to send formula or diapers. They're reliable, like totally vetted, really good. But it's just absolutely crazy what's happening there. And we'll probably touch on it next week. But a lot of National Guard troops from many, many states, I think over 5,500, are activated in Western North Carolina alone right now.
11,000 now.
11,000 now. Okay. But anyway, we'll talk about it next week. But shout out to all the troops who are responding here in the States and helping all those people out. You are much needed.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Maybe Connor will be back. Maybe you won't.
Nah, who cares?
So, it's on the retreat.